For the engineering of consent, the invisible architecture of control, or opening, the torches of freedom. Picture this. If you were an American woman in the 1920s, smoking a cigarette in public was absolutely unacceptable, a trademark, behavior of prostitutes and rebels. But something extraordinary happened during the Easter parade in New York. Dozens of elegant women simultaneously lit their cigarettes, calling them torches of freedom, a symbol of female emancipation. Sounds empowering, right? What these women didn't know was that they were starring in the first major social engineering experiment of the modern era. Behind that seemingly spontaneous demonstration was Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, working for the American Tobacco Company. Bernays had discovered something revolutionary. You don't need to sell a product. You just need to sell an identity, a feeling, a dream. Using his famous uncle's psychoanalytic theories about the unconscious mind, Bernays transformed smoking from a male vice into a symbol of female empowerment. Within a few years, Lucky Strike sales to women exploded. More importantly, this marked the birth of what Bernays called the engineering of consent. Now, the invisible architecture, what you're about to discover, goes far beyond shallow conspiracy theories. We're talking about an invisible architecture of control, operating in layers, so deep within human consciousness that its victims not only consent to their own manipulation, they fiercely defend it. Today, almost a century after Freud's nephew ran that experiment, we live submerged in an infinitely more sophisticated version of the same manipulation. Every impulse buy, every political debate, every social crisis, all orchestrated by forces operating in the shadows of our perception. And most people don't suspect a thing. A manufacturing consent, the media filter, when Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman published Manufacturing Consent in 1988, they exposed how the media works as a filter that not only decides what we think about, but also what we're allowed to think about. Everything you consume, from the Netflix series you binge to the news story on your feed, carries a hidden layer of information serving the interests of whoever controls that media. Consider this. After the Vietnam War, U.S. government studies found that the population had developed what they called a sickly inhibition against violence. In other words, Americans had become too reluctant to support military action, problematic for an imperial superpower. As investigative journalist David Robb documented in Operation Hollywood how the Pentagon shapes and censors the movies. The U.S. Department of Defense has been influencing Hollywood for over 50 years, offering technical support and military equipment in exchange for control over movie content. Films like Rambo weren't just casual entertainment. They were carefully orchestrated psychological operations to reprogram public perception of violence and patriotism. The Pentagon systematically collaborates with studios to ensure war films portray conflicts as necessary and heroic. They provide military gear, locations, and technical consultants, but only if they get final script approval. The result? An entire generation grew up romanticizing war, psychologically primed for decades of military interventions. The science of distraction. The most powerful tool in the engineering of consent is distraction. The ancient Romans knew this. Keep the masses fed and entertained, and they won't question power. Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Today, this strategy has been perfected into a science. Your TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube algorithms are designed by behavioral neuroscientists to hijack your brain's reward system. As former Google executive Tristan Harris revealed in The Social Dilemma, these platforms compete for the most valuable commodity of the digital age, your attention. The goal isn't just to keep you glued to the screen. It's to drain every ounce of mental energy that could be used for personal growth or critical questioning. After all, who's going to meditate or read a book when there's an endless feed of content designed to be more addictive than cocaine? As Aldous Huxley once said, you don't need to ban books when you can make people not want to read them. And the hijacking of education. Formal education has been completely co-opted by this agenda. The control over what can or cannot be taught in schools is meticulously planned. After all, this is the system's main line of defense against mass awareness. Subjects that could spark critical consciousness are systematically excluded or distorted. In their place, we get fragmented knowledge that creates technical specialists, but wisdom-illiterate citizens. The goal is to keep the majority of people at the lowest possible level of education, just enough to perform their designated tasks, but not enough to question the system that employs them. Universities, which should be centers for critical thinking and questioning, have become factories for ideological reproduction. Students graduate with expensive diplomas, but without real capacity for independent analysis. They learn what to think, not how to think. The weaponization of emotions. While the defense of this system operates through programmed ignorance, the attack happens through emotional manipulation. Those behind the curtain have understood something fundamental. Emotions are the language of the subconscious. Whoever controls emotions controls actions. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Do you really control your emotions and decisions? According to decades of behavioral neuroscience research, the answer is no. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner in economics, demonstrated in Thinking, Fast and Slow, how our brain makes decisions within milliseconds, through automatic and irrational processes, long before our conscious mind even knows what's happening. The engineers of consent not only know this, they've weaponized it against us. Modern marketing is psychology applied with surgical precision. Images of babies, children, and pets don't appear in ads by accident. They trigger deep instincts, creating unconscious compulsions that bypass rational thought. How many times have you made an impulsive purchase and later asked yourself, why the hell did I buy this? That wasn't your failure. That was the system working exactly as designed. You were manipulated through emotional triggers operating below your level of awareness. The sexual strategy. One of the most brilliant strategies is the systematic sexualization of culture. Meticulously calculated social engineering. The hypersexualization of media serves two strategic purposes: profit, obviously, and keeping most of humanity trapped at the lowest levels of consciousness development. In men, sexual energy is constantly drained through pornography and cultural hypersexualization, creating chronically fatigued individuals lacking the vital force to question or resist. This energy, when conserved, generates personal power and mental clarity. Its constant dissipation produces weak, dependent, and easily controlled individuals. In women, the strategy is reversed but equally destructive. Natural feminine energy, which comes from deep connection with authentic power, is corrupted through hypersexualization and objectification. The result is complete disconnection from genuine strength, creating an existential void that must be filled with compulsive consumerism. This toxic ecosystem feeds itself. The void created by the corruption of natural energies generates a compulsion to fill it with products, experiences, and superficial relationships. It's a perfectly designed vicious cycle built to generate profit and dependency. Cultural infantilization. Another fundamental pillar of this control architecture is cultural infantilization. Popular music, movies, and digital content are deliberately dumbed down to treat adults like 12-year-old children. This isn't an accidental side effect of cultural democratization, it's a precise psychological strategy. As Edward Bernays himself wrote in Propaganda, adults question authority, analyze critically, and make independent decisions. Children are easily influenced, respond to authority without questioning, and accept simple narratives about a complex world. Through constant exposure to simplified entertainment and basic language, we create totally dependent individuals with no capacity for complex decision-making. The plan worked perfectly. Just watch any modern political debate and you'll see adults behaving like kids fighting during recess. There's the problem-reaction-solution cycle. Social violence is also carefully cultivated to serve the interests of power. Governments systematically fuel social tensions, and then present solutions that involve more control, more surveillance, more restrictions on individual freedoms. It's the classic problem-reaction-solution strategy. Create or amplify a problem. Wait for the public reaction of fear and outrage. Then implement the solution you wanted from the start. These protective measures aren't just accepted, they're demanded by the population itself. Open your eyes and really look at what's on TV. News. Programs are a constant bombardment of tragedy, violence, and conflict. Not because these are the only things happening in the world, but because fear and anger are the most useful emotional states for political manipulation. Rare's the deeper layers. Everything we've discussed so far is just the tip of the iceberg. the visible mechanisms for those with eyes to see. But there are much deeper layers where this engineering has infiltrated. Every foundational institution of society, financial, pharmaceutical, food, educational, and even spiritual, operates under this same command. Pharmaceutical corporations don't just sell medication, they redefine the parameters of what constitutes health and disease. Conditions once seen as normal, variations of human experience, are now pathologized and medicalized. Natural sadness becomes clinical depression. Introversion turns into social anxiety disorder, and attention hijacked by screens becomes ADHD. This medicalization serves multiple purposes. It generates astronomical profits, creates chemical dependency, and most importantly, it redefines spiritual and social problems as individual biological defects, requiring chemical intervention instead of personal transformation or social change. The perfect tiger in circuses. Tigers are trained with whips until they obey commands. The obedient tiger is the good tiger. But there's an even better kind of tiger, the one that doesn't need to be whipped. The one that has internalized the system's doctrine so deeply that it behaves exactly as desired without needing to be forced. This tiger obeys on its own. It has fully internalized the rules of the game. It no longer needs to be coerced because it has become its own jailer. That's the ultimate goal of the engineering of consent. To create a population that self-controls, self-censors, consumes exactly what it's supposed to consume, and thinks exactly what it's supposed to think, all while believing they're making free choices. The dawn of awakening. This situation may seem hopeless, but there's one element the architects of control cannot manipulate: the natural rhythm of consciousness evolution. We're living in a period of transition where, no matter how hard they try to keep humanity asleep, greater forces are at work catalyzing a collective awakening. With each passing year, it becomes harder for the shadow to remain hidden. People are waking up, and the more people awaken, the weaker the illusion that keeps us trapped becomes. The real revolution cannot be a traditional violent uprising. Anyone who's read Orwell's Animal Farm knows that swapping leaders without transforming consciousness just perpetuates the cycle of oppression in new forms. The real revolution must happen in the silence of each individual's consciousness. By breaking your own chains and abandoning your old way of thinking, you're actively fighting the current system. That's how you take the power back. The choice before us. There's only one real choice: conform or become, in the eyes of the system, an enemy. Every time you control one of your impulses, every time you question what you're seeing on the news, every time you choose real education over empty entertainment, you're contributing to the revolution. The engineering of consent only works as long as we remain unconscious of its mechanisms. The moment we understand how it operates, its power over us dissolves. As Martin Luther King once said, "There are some things in our society and in our world to which I am proud to be maladjusted." This understanding is your liberation and the beginning of the transformation the world so desperately needs. The question I leave with you is this: what kind of tiger are you?